Good morning and welcome to another online Sunday school class with Tunnel Hill Baptist Church. As always, we like to begin by reminding you that we here at Tunnel Hill Baptist Church believe that Jesus is the Christ, that he's the Son of the living God who lived a perfect life and died a sacrificial death for your sins and for mine, and that he rose from the grave 3 days later to give us new life in him. If you'd like more information about what it means to make Jesus Christ your Lord and Savior, we would invite you to follow the link in the description. This will take you to a full gospel presentation. It'll also show you how to respond to the gospel and how to connect with Tunnel Hill Baptist Church. If you live in the Hardin County, Kentucky area, we would invite you to join us for worship at 11 o'clock on Sunday mornings. We are both in person and online through Facebook Live. If you do not live in the Hardin County, Kentucky area, we still want to connect with you because we want to help you find a Bible-believing church where you do live. Excuse me. As we wrap up our study on the book of Numbers and Deuteronomy, we are now in session 13, and that is titled God's Power. And we're going to be looking at Deuteronomy chapter 33, and we're going to look at the first 5 verses of this chapter, as well as verses 26 through 29. So again, this is session 13, titled God's Power, looking at Deuteronomy 33, verses 1 through 5, and verses 26 through 29. Our book begins and it has a picture to kind of start everything off, and it's a picture of a parent. It looks like a dad in a pool, and he's inviting his child. He's inviting his son to jump into the water in order to be caught by him. And this is a scene that we're all very familiar with. Either you've been the kid or you've been the parent, and you're encouraging your kid to jump in the water, to give swimming or whatever it might be a shot, and you can kind of remember all the things that go with it. And the book has this to write about the scene. It says this scene, we may have been the parent or we may have been the child. The child is standing on the side of the pool and the parent is in the water, arms outstretched and saying, "You can do it. I'll catch you. I promise you'll be fine." The child is hesitating. Ready? On the count of 3. Still hesitant, but finally the child lunges and is grabbed safely by the parent as he reaches the water. And this leads the book to ask this question, and that is, what is the relationship between fear and that feeling of insecurity, as well as that feeling of trust, paired with that feeling of security? And so what we're going to do throughout our study is we're going to ask you questions, and we want to encourage you to take some time and really respond to those questions. And we're going to do that a couple of ways. And anytime we ask a question, we're going to invite you to pause the video. And as you pause the video, if you're watching this by yourself, we would love for you to get a piece of paper, notebook maybe, and be taking notes. And then whenever we ask a question, take time to respond to that question and just how to have an opportunity to respond. If you're watching this with a friend or family or your spouse, we would also encourage you to pause the video, excuse me, and then just have that conversation, have that discussion, talk about it. And in both cases, whenever you're ready, we want you to hit play again, and then we'll keep going in our study. So again, the question is this: what is the connection between fear and insecurity, but also between trust and security? Take a couple minutes, pause the video, answer that question, and then whenever you're ready, hit play again, and we'll keep going in our study. All right, so hopefully you've had some time to answer that question and kind of think through that again. And a lot of times when you are with someone you trust, when you are with someone that you know and that they know you, and you know that they're going to take care of you or they're going to be there for you, that does give you an overwhelming sense of security that you are in a safe place. By the same contrast, a lot of times when you are in a place where it's marked by fear, where you don't know what the people around you, what their intentions are for you, and whether they want to help you or to do you harm, you can feel, we might say that we feel like we're in danger, and that is inherently an insecure place to be. If you are in danger, then you are not in a secure place in order to do those types of things. And so we're going to talk about that a lot today, and basically how trust in the Lord leads to the nation of Israel being in a secure place, but a lack of trust in the Lord will lead them into a place where they will be insecure. The book has this to say. This message, what we have here, is part of the final days of Moses' life and Moses' ministry. Moses' final words to the Israelites. He sought to prepare them for the next major event events on their journey, and he also reminded them why they had every reason to trust God as they moved forward to Canaan. So let's dive into our study this morning. It's going to be a relatively short study as we only have 2 sections to go through. And we're going to begin by looking at Deuteronomy 33, verses 1 through 5. And as we do so, I want you to listen for the blessings that Moses spoke over the entire nation of Israel. So, picking up in Deuteronomy 33, we're going to read these first 5 verses. It says, "This is the blessing that Moses, the man of God, gave the Israelites before his death. He said, the Lord came from Sinai and appeared to them from Seir. He shone on them from Mount Paran and came with 10,000 holy ones, with lightning from his right hand for them. Indeed, he loves the people. All your holy ones are in your hand, and they assemble at your feet. Each receives your words. Moses gave instruction, a possession for the assembly of Jacob. So he became king at Jeshurun when the leaders of the people gathered with the tribes of Israel." So let's look at this for just a second and let's kind of think about what blessings are taking place here. And we see right off the bat that he came to them at Sinai, but he also appeared to them at Mount Seir and Mount Paran, and he did so with his holy angels. And there's this idea of even through Israel from Sinai until where they are today, God had been continually with them, and not only continually with them, but with his angels, with his legion of angels and the power in his right hand. It talks about that he loves the people, that they are in his hand, which is a place of security and protection, and that he gave them his instruction, that he gave them this as a possession for the nation of Israel, and that he is their king, that he is their ruler. Now, the book has this to say about this. It says in verse 2, the pronouns change person from third person, he, to second person, you. The shift indicates a heightened sense of intimacy and closeness. No longer were the words about God, but the words were to him. God's action and theirs, his holding and their listening, had caused the relationship to go deeper. God's words came through Moses, and he was the conduit through which God conveyed his message. And so what we see here is even in the midst of this blessing, we see how first, like Moses is saying, hey, this is what's going on. And he's talking to Israel and he's kind of talking to God in the third person, about God in the third person. But then suddenly what he was saying became really kind of a go-between, where he is saying, God, to you, these things, and then to you guys, I want you to hear this. And he becomes that. And like he says, there becomes this kind of intimacy and this closeness to that, and God is drawing them into that closer relationship. We see that when he begins to say, indeed, he loves his people in this way. With that in mind, we see this kind of interesting statement here where it says, so he became the king in Yeshurun. And that's an interesting word. It's a word that comes from the word to be straight. We might translate today that word Jeshurun as the upright ones, or those who were, belonging to the righteous one, his picked people. And we see that because of what happened in Sinai and because of what God had done through all that, God is declaring himself as king of Israel. And this is going to be a huge change in any other nation around them, because all the nations around them would have kings. We've seen them fight some of these kings already. There's more as they go in there. And they would have usually have an earthly leader, and then their gods would be far away. But God is saying here, you won't have a king because I will be your king. Not to say that they won't have leaders, not to say that they won't have people like Moses and like Joshua and like the judges to come, but God was supposed to be their king. And it wasn't until all the way in 1 Samuel that the people began to cry out for a king. And God even himself says to Samuel, he says, listen, they're not rejecting you as my prophet. They're rejecting me as their king and wanting an earthly king. And this is the passage where he says, at Sinai, throughout all of this, God became the king of Israel and the leader of the people. And we see that change. And so looking at all of this, we see what God is doing is in this blessing right off the bat, is he is promising this closeness with Israel, that he is not going to be a far off king, but he is going to be their leader, and he is going to be the one who takes care of them. In fact, we even see that in the passage when he says, all your holy ones are in your hand. He's saying that they are safe and secure and in the possession of God. And then with that they assemble at his feet. So they come before him as those who would to hear his voice and to follow his leadership. There's no kind of intimacy like this in the new world. And even today, there is no kind of intimacy in all of the nations and all of the religions out there like the intimacy that we have with God through Christ Jesus, that we are adopted as sons and daughters, that we are filled with God the Spirit in all those ways. And he's beginning to help them understand the closeness and the intimacy that he wants with them. That does lead to the book to ask this question. It says, why do you think that the Bible portrays God in so many ways, such as a warrior and a king and a shepherd? Which biblical portrait or title comes to mind when you think of him, of God Most High, and why? So think about that a little bit. We look at this passage, and he really does present himself, obviously, as the God of that they encountered on the mountaintops, but then he really presents himself as their king and their leader of Israel. But when you think of God, when you think of the God Most High, when you think of Yahweh, what words would you use? What kind of titles might you give to God, and why do you usually associate those with him? Take a couple minutes, pause the video, answer that question, and then we'll keep going in our study. All right, so the book asks the question, why do you think the Bible portrays God in so many ways, such as a warrior and a king and a shepherd? And which portrait or title do you come at? And, I like all of them for, just kind of putting that out. And as a guy, I really love when we get into some of the Old Testament things and it says our God is a warrior. I love that, that idea that God is going to fight for me and he's going to fight my battles for me and that he goes before me and the victory is through him. I love those things. But to me, I think the most powerful image and portrait that we get from God is that of a father, that he is our father. And for me, it goes back to that closeness. I had a pretty decent relationship with my dad. And when you think about a good dad and really the best dad, and God is the best father, I think of someone who is not only a protector and someone that's going to stand up before you and stand between you and danger, but also one that's going to be there for you, that's going to care for you, that's going to minister to you, like like a dad that takes care of you when you're sick, that's going to defend you and stick up for you, and a God that's going to be close to you that you get to enjoy time with and have, like it says, that intimacy with and know that person better than anything. And I think when we think of God as a father, almost all of these other things seem to roll into that idea when we think about what a good father is one who loves us and cares for us, who defends us, who teaches us, instructs us, who leads us and shows us how to do things. That really a good dad is all of those things. And so for me, the title that I think of most, and maybe it's because it encompasses all of them, is God as my father or God as my dad. Let's keep going in our study. We're going to look at verses 26 through 29 now. Like I said, it's kind of a short Bible study today, so we're only having two sections to really look into. And we're going to look at verses 26 through 29, and I want you to kind of notice what phrases they are that represent security for Israel. So we've got this idea, this image of God, of Yahweh as the King of Israel that is going to protect them and hold them in his hand. And then we're going to get a lot more of that imagery of security here. So Deuteronomy 33, picking up in verse 26, we see this. It says, there is none like the God of Jeshurun, who rides the heaven to your aid, the clouds in his majesty. The God of old is your dwelling place, and underneath are the everlasting arms. He drives out the enemy before you and commands, destroy. So Israel dwells securely. Jacob lives untroubled in the land of grain and new wine. Even his skies drip with dew. How happy you are, Israel! Who is like you, a people saved by the Lord? He's the shield that protects you, the sword you boast in. Your enemies will cringe before you, and you will tread on their backs. And so this passage is just riddled with those ideas of security and securely. You have the idea of the God who rides to your aid. So you have a God who is running to your aid, that he is your dwelling place. He's your safe space, if you will. He is your safe and secure location. And you have in him, you have these everlasting arms. And arms were always a symbol of strength and power. And so he has powerful arms that never end, that because of him you will dwell securely, you will be untroubled, you will have grain and wine, you will not have drought and famine. This is a God who has saved you. And probably the most powerful of all these images is when he says he is your shield and your sword. That he is not only your shield, the one that protects you, but he is also the sword and the one in which you will drive out your enemies, and one that will go and do the, attack and do the things necessary, and that your enemies will cringe because of it. This whole passage, almost everything in this passage is a metaphor and an allusion or a reference to how God is their great protector. That leads the book to say this. It says, some commentators link God's dwelling place with the heavens and clouds mentioned in verse 26. Thus, this verse highlights that God is above his people and his everlasting arms are beneath. Nothing could better picture God's dependable protection and security for his people. Like a strong and loving father, he safeguards his own in his caring embrace. And I love that, because there's this idea that God is above you, and you might think of our head, and his everlasting, powerful arms are beneath. And so you have this God who scoops them up. And I kind of think about, sometimes when you're taking care of your pet, or maybe, you've had a dog and you're walking your dog, and other dogs come in and they look like they're coming to attack them, and you just kind of grab your dog and you scoop your dog up. And so your head is still above them, but your arms are up underneath them, and you've lifted them up away from danger and away from the things. And now your dog, or maybe it's your kid or whoever it is, that now they are scooped up and they are safe and secure in your arms. And that's what the imagery that God is giving there, that you are safe and secure in the powerful arms of the God who loves you, in his safe embrace. Again, we have this illustration of God's power through his sword and his shield, that God's protection as well as his promise to fight for Israel was a source of comfort and security to the nations. In fact, with that, the book asks this question. It says, what promises did God make to the Israelites about things that they would enjoy once they made it to Canaan? And so we see in our passage that he talks about that there's the grain and the new wine and the dew that will drip, so that they will be provided for. And we have all this idea of how Israel is going to be secure in the new promised land. But I want you to actually take a couple of minutes and think through this. Like, this is the kind of climax, the last final promise before they go into the land. I want you to think about, what are all the promises that God made to Israel that they would enjoy once they entered into the promised land, and how do we even see those confirmed in this promise here? Take a couple minutes, pause the video, answer that question. What are some of the promises that we've been reading about throughout this study that God would provide and give to the nation of Israel? And then how do we see those confirmed in this passage? Pause the video, answer that question, and then we'll start to wrap up our study. All right, so what promises did we hear? Well, we know that he promised to bring them to a land flowing with milk and honey. We know that he promised to give them the land and to give them the cities. We know that they said that they would, eat grapes and drink wine and do all these things from fruit they didn't grow, and live in houses that they didn't build, and all that stuff. He promised them that that if anyone came against him, he says, anybody who come against you, even if they came at you with 10,000 people, that they would scatter away in 7 different directions if you do what I say. And there'll be security in there, that there'll always be blessings on their herds and their flocks. There would always be blessings on their produce, that everything they did would succeed, that they would be free from drought and all those things. And we see all of that confirmed here. The promises of God were still there. And he's saying, listen, if you follow me and if you trust me, I am going to take care of you. You will live in security. You will not, your enemies will will tread lightly and will cower before you, and I will provide all those things. And we get all of that here. We get the idea of him being their shield and their sword, that the enemies will cringe before you, that the skies will drip with dew, that you'll never have drought, that you will enjoy the grain and the new wine. And I love this. It says, so Israel will dwell securely and Jacob will live untroubled. And I think that's an all-encompassing thing. So not only will they live securely in the land, they won't fear raiders or invading armies, but also they will be untroubled. They will not fear the harvest. They will not worry about droughts. They will not fear locusts or blight or anything like that. They will live in the land and they will live in an untroubled way, knowing that God would provide for them and they would be able to fully experience and fully embrace God's promise for them. And all of that is confirmed in this passage if they would trust in him. I love this one statement. He says, how happy you are, which is another word for blessed. How happy, how blessed you are, Israel, for who is like you, a people saved by the Lord. Now, I think that's ultimately a reference to what God had done in the Exodus event and delivering them from the nation of Israel. But it's a reminder to them that God has proven himself the God of Israel again and again and again and again. And I really think there's no question that that's who he was. And because of that, because of all those things, he says, Israel, there's no one like you. And because of that, you should be going into the land of Canaan with confidence, because no one has experienced the love and the favor of God Most High like you have. This leads the book to ask one last question that I want us to think about today, and it's this. How does it teach us about God and that he is our dwelling place? When we look at Deuteronomy 33, especially when we look at the first part and the last part, the in-between part is dealing with each individual tribe, which is a little bit more specific. But when we look at the first part and the last part about God's power and God's character, but also God's love and provision for his people, and so much so that he will be our dwelling place, as it says here, the God of old is your dwelling place, and underneath are his everlasting arms. How does that teach? What does that teach you about who God is and about how God is your dwelling place, or God is our dwelling place? And so what I want you to do, and I know this is a short video, but it's a short lesson, is I want you to close out your time really thinking about that question. What does it teach us about God that he is our dwelling place? And I want you to really think about that, to talk about that. What are the ways that is applicable in your life today, that God is your dwelling place? And as you think about that and as you talk about that, I want you to also close out your time in prayer, praising God for his love and for his protection and his grace, and for the fact that he is our dwelling place. So this is what we're inviting you to do today. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you've had an excellent Thanksgiving and are ready as we move into the Christmas season, as we get to celebrate the birth of Christ. Thank you again for joining us today. Join us for service at 11 o'clock, both in person and online through Facebook Live. Thank you so much. God bless.